welcome today's guest speaker, like I said, Devin. He is a published author. He's written 16 books. And he's also an executive coach focusing on making happiness a winning business strategy. Please give a warm welcome for Devin.
Thank you. Good morning. Anyone here maxed out on their happiness? Everybody got a little bit more room in the tank? All right, quick pulse check. Just because I want to make sure I'm in the right venue. Can I get a show of hands if you know someone at work who's a little cynical, salty, negative, or complains a little bit? Anybody know anyone like that at work? Okay. All right, how about if you know someone in your personal life who's a little cynical, salty, negative, or complains a little bit? All right. If either one of those groups or people in the room, would you point at them? We'll get them out of here right now. I mean, you know what I mean? All right, so truth be told, I like to set the context. I am absolutely no guru. All right, I don't see dead people. I was not a child prodigy. I'm not that guy, although we share the same haircut. That was my first smartphone. Anyone remember this? All right, we talk about Steve Jobs a lot. I was the guy, I just didn't get credit, so for what that's worth. But things are changing, right? Even science is changing. I mean, everything's changing if you think about it, right? I mean, it's amazing. Even healthcare's changing, right? I mean, just think about it. I mean, over and over and over. I mean, I just can't keep up with the new normal, all the changes. It's fascinating. Even news is changing. History, right? We talk about fake news. How about fake history, right? There's just a lot of things going on in our world that are kind of just keeping us negative and neutral. But I digress. Anyone here do yoga? All right, you do. Okay, awesome. I didn't realize though that I had been doing yoga freshman year. We just called it something different. We didn't call it yoga back then in the 90s, but I'd been doing mindfulness for years undergraduate. I just, you know what I mean? I just guess I was on the bleeding edge. But, that aside, we're going to have a little test just to make sure you guys are okay with this thing called joy. I'd like you to turn your chair and face a partner if you would, please. Don't be a creep, just face them. You can pair up, just find anybody. It's not awkward, it's a human being. You'll be okay, all right? Everybody got a partner? All right, now what I'd like you to do, I'm a serious dude, as you can tell. I don't play around. What I'd like you to do is look deeply and intimately into your partner's eyes. All right, how was that? Was that okay? All right, if you like what you see, wink at them. No, I'm kidding. There's always a creep in every audience. I like to figure out who they are early in my talks. Dude, what are you doing, man? It's a work talk. What are you doing? All right, all kidding aside, I'm silly that way. I'd like you to just follow me. I'd like you to reach out with your right hand, just like on my slide here. Hold your partner's hand. Just hold it. All right? Is it soft? No, don't answer. That's weird. All right, everybody got a hand? All right, now follow my directions, because again, this is a little experiment. Follow me up here. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. I declare a thumb war. Let's go. Get on that thumb. All right, can I get a show of hands if you are the winner of our inaugural thumb war? Can we get a standing ovation for our thumb war winners? When's the last time you had a thumb war at work? I just heard never. So what we find with the research is that when good things happen at work, we call it savoring. When good things happen, you got to memorialize it, because if we don't memorialize the good stuff, it's like it doesn't exist. So I'd like you to lean in with your partner. Get a little selfie with your partner right now, just so we don't forget that thumb war. If you would, that's like a wedding photo, prom photo. Just a quick photo. That way we don't forget that it just happened. Put the thumb in there if you would, too. Well done. Hey, just one, not like 12. I mean, what are we doing? All right, so for most of you, that emotion you just experienced was called joy. Maybe you haven't had it in a while. Is joy an appropriate emotion at work sometimes? If we had more joy, Would you be politically, morally, religiously opposed to that at work? I would imagine not. Okay, so we'll talk about that now. Is it possible to love your job? Yeah. Are you sure? Yeah. As I stand here right before you today, there's only one culture on the planet that has a word that says, I love work. I love my job. There's joy at work. If there is no word for it, what does that suggest about the concept? That it doesn't exist. There's only one culture on the planet that has a word. That is the Nordic countries. There is the word. Don't ask me to pronounce it. I traveled the globe, been to 17 countries, and this is the only culture that I can find that actually has a word that says literally, I love work. Now think about that in the context of our discussion. We've grown up in a world where we don't even think loving our jobs is even possible. If you don't believe me, have you ever seen someone about to retire? It looks like a rendition of Shawshank Redemption. They're literally counting on the wall the days, and they're waving at the warden as they're walking out. Anyone know what I'm talking about? Because we give up 40 years of our life to go then do what we've always wanted to do. I would argue that's a lot to give up. Would you agree? That we can actually make work an awesome place, and we're going to talk about in the context of today. Now, I'm going to show you a quick video. There's a gentleman in this video that's a little bit different. I want you to tell me whether or not people like this guy make a positive impact at work.
I hate Mondays.
Yeah, they're the worst.
No worries, man. Everything will be all right.
Yeah, man.
Don't fret me, brother. Sticky bun come soon. Yeah. Wicked coffee, Mr. Jim. Julia, turn the frown the other way around.
Hey, Dave, you're from Minnesota, right?
Yes, I. The land of 10,000 lakes. The Gopher State.
So in conclusion, things are pretty dismal.
You know what this room needs? A smile. Who wanna come with I?
Traveling along, there's a song that we're singing. Come on, get happy.
You guys are 3 minutes late.
Don't be no cloud on a sunny day.
Yeah, chill, Winston.
Sir?
Respect, boss man.
That's the power of German engineering.
All right, so I think we know who that gentleman is. Do people like that make a positive impact at work? Yes. Okay, we collectively agree. How so? Joy. To make you smile, joy, what else? Contagious, what else? Stir it up. I love the gestures, brother. Stir it up. What else?
Lets people know they can be happy.
Okay, so they're a good thing, right? Yeah. So if that's the case, why don't we have more of them? At work.
Is it the crab complex where you pull people down?
Would you agree? May, right? What else?
They don't get promoted.
Oh, whoa. All right. Yeah. All right, what else? Hashtag real talk, right? Work 20 years in corporate America. If you're too freaking happy at work, what do people say to you or how do they treat you? You're weird? What are you smoking? You must not have enough work to do. Stop fooling around. That's not professional. What else? You don't fit. Think about that. So if it's a pejorative if you're too fired up. So Luke Skywalker? Jeffrey Dahmer? Yeah. Right? Because if you show up to work look like a serial killer, that's just Tim being Tim. That's just Mary being Mary. She's worked in accounting for 17 years. You know Billy, he's in the warehouse, he's salty as heck. Why do we normalize that? But if you're too into it, why if you're the Karate Kid? Why if you're waxing on, catching flies with chopsticks, that's a bad thing? Why do we do that even though the research clearly shows that to work better, I need to feel better? Folks, truth be told, we have normalized average at work. We're suspicious. We don't even think happiness at work is even possible. Because if you did, you would support those people. But too often at work, we pull them down like crabs. It makes us feel uncomfortable if people are too fired up at work. We question your motives and intentions. We do. Now, I love data. This came from Gallup. Globally, at work, right now, people fit into 3 buckets, 142 countries. Either happy, not happy, or actively not happy. Does anyone know what actively not happy is? Yeah, I mean, you're so freaking unhappy, you want to share with everybody. You gossip, you complain, you roll your eyes, you're sarcastic, you're passive aggressive, you complain about everything. Anyone know anyone like that at work? Yeah, I know you do. Now, you know these faces. Don't act like you don't. We know these faces at work, especially during football season. This is what it looks like. Now, that aside, real quick, what percentage of the planet at work is happy, not happy, actively not happy? I'll give you 15 seconds with your thumb wrestling partner. Let's go. Let's figure it out. What do you think? Match it up. 142 countries at work. Happy, not happy, actively not happy. All right, 5 seconds. All right, that's good. A lot of rich discussion here. So if one of your signature strengths is you're like super cerebral and stuff, just raise your hand. It helps with these activities. Anybody who's super smart? Okay, great. Okay, yeah. What do you got? What'd you come up with?
Well, I'd love for it to be, just for the sake of the discussion, 13% happy, 24% not happy, and 63% actively not happy.
Okay. You guys, everyone's like, oh. All right. Thank you very much.
I actually have a question based on what you said earlier. Wouldn't the 13% not want to report?
Well, again, you would think there would be a little bit of, little
Happy, not the 30%.
the reticence, yeah. Could be, but in this case, it was globally, not just the U.S. Yes.
I actually would say it'd be 63% not happy, 24% fired, actively not happy.
All right, so you just guessed like you did on the SAT, so let's not act like we, we're all that, okay? So that aside, here's the answer. I love the bravado when you get it right. Totally get, yeah, I got it. You know what I mean? Like, so look at that. 87% of the planet right now is reporting they're either negative or neutral at work. Does that surprise you? See, most people aren't necessarily negative, they're neutral. Do you know what neutral looks like at work? Hey, Billy, how are you today? I don't know, dude, it's Monday. Billy, you gonna be okay? I guess someday. Come on, brother from another mother. Billy, you gonna be okay? Okay, maybe hump day. Anyone know anyone like that? All these little cute, cheeky little expressions. They're just doing just enough. You check their pulse every 3 hours to make sure they're still breathing. Maybe send them an email. So again, folks, right now, we have created the golden age of disengagement at work. Now, let's talk about it. It's so systemic right now in Japan that you can hire fake friends and family to hang out with you. Think about that. We have so little connectivity with human beings now that you literally can hire fake friends and family. Not judging, I'm just giving you context on where we are as a species. Most people would rather send an email or text or tweet or Facebook to talk to another human being. Like, that's totally awkward. Just text me, bro. You know what I mean? That's, again, globally where we are. We don't have a work brain and a home brain. But let me give you a little data. News. We talked about fake news. Relatively out of the University of Pennsylvania. Watching 3 to 5 minutes of negative news in the morning primes your brain up to 6 to 8 hours later. So if you listen to negative stuff in the morning, it stays with you. All right, now again, I don't need to argue. If you look at the news, it's predominantly what? It's all negative. It's calamity, disease, war, Russian investigation, hacking, global warming. It's all negative stuff. So let me give you a little context. You go to work and you got Toxic Tim and Miserable Maria. You go home and you got Uncle Freddie who's negative and salty. You got your cousin who's cynical, and you turn on the news. If you're not careful, you can be upside down emotionally very, very quickly. Now, that aside, part of the problem also, folks, is this is implicitly what we're taught here in the U.S. Do great work, especially as an entrepreneur, have big success, and then I'll be happy. That's implicitly what we're taught. That to be happy, you have to be successful. And to be successful, you have to show and you have to buy all this stuff and have all these toys and the zip code and the cars and the skinny jeans and you can't even walk anymore, but you got all the stuff. But the research, though, is actually very, very different, the brain. Let me just unpack that for a second with you.
What I found at almost all of these schools and companies is that they follow the same formula. And that formula is, if you work harder, then you'll be more successful. And if you're successful, well, then you'll be happier. What we're finding in the field of positive psychology is that this formula is broken. Part of that has to do with how we define success. Every time we're successful, we merely move the goalpost of what success looked like. So for example, if we hit our sales target last quarter, we merely change what that sales target is for the next quarter. And if happiness is on the opposite side of that success, every time you change what success looks like, happiness gets pushed over the horizon. But more importantly, what we've discovered in the field of positive psychology is that the formula is actually backwards. Our brains work in the opposite way. Happiness actually fuels success, not the other way around. If you can find a way to get your brain to become positive, your success rates will increase, and as a result, work will become more productive, enjoyable, and rewarding. So if we can change the formula, if we can reverse it, then we can maximize our brain's potential and our performance will increase dramatically. Not to mention the fact that we'll be happier right now in the present.
So again, typically this is what we're taught. This is what the research bears out. Now, if I asked you for a signature moment in your lives, performance-wise, either at work, academia, athletic, church, drama, military, think about a time when you were performing at an extremely high level, performance-wise. Is it safe to assume that you also felt pretty good upstairs? Yes. Would you buy that? So intuitively, we have known it. Now, the research clearly shows it, that human beings are at their best when they feel their best. That aside, knowing is not always doing. So, in terms of this, the formula's backwards. What would be different at your workplace if we switched this thinking? How would work be different if people were truly putting happiness first at work? If they were making happiness a business strategy, what would be different? I'll give you about a minute to talk with your partners around you, either your thumb wrestling partner or your small little tribe around you. What would be different? Chew on these two questions for a second.
And
30 seconds. Fifteen seconds. All right, let's talk about it, folks. If I could have your attention, please. A lot of rich discussion. What do you think? How would it be different? Anybody? What would be different? Yes.
I think the company would be more productive.
More productive? Would you buy that?
Yep.
Yes.
All right, what else?
Less turnover.
Less turnover? Boom. That's an outcome we can measure, right? What else? Less burnout? Yep.
I'm going to be a little controversial and say a lot of people might leave because they just realize that who they are is not in alignment with
Could be, right? This happiness thing is like, wow, that's a little overrated. I'm in the wrong place.
their ultimate passion lies elsewhere.
True, but also this. If I've worked 20 years at Lockheed Martin or wherever, State Farm or some big behemoth Fortune 500 company, and then all of a sudden I bring happiness in, you're going to be a little suspicious?
Yeah.
So let's keep it contextually relevant, right? If I've never had happiness at work, just because you all of a sudden show up at Costco Pizza and start doing high fives in the hallway, doesn't mean, wow, I've been waiting all that my whole career. Thank God you showed up. Because most people don't think happiness at work is even possible. But happiness could be a business strategy. Would you think, is that possible?
Yeah.
If you think happiness drives outcomes, then it has to be a strategy. You have to treat it like a strategy. And that's what the work that I do. Now, I'm going to hit the fast forward button. Everything I'm talking about is based on the tenets of positive psychology. For the last 500 years, we've started studying what's wrong with people. In the last 25 years, we started studying what's right with people. How do people flourish as human beings? Now, there's 3 findings. Number 1, happiness is an advantage. We are at our best when we feel our best. Every outcome we can measure based on science goes up when people feel better. Now, it's a choice. Do you buy that? Right? But again, invariably, most people don't think it's a choice. It's just things happen and invariably, and it spreads. You already mentioned that. It's contagious. If I'm around positive, optimistic people, positive emotions are contagious. So we know that. Now, my definition of happiness is akin to the Greek definition of happiness. The Greeks thought happiness was the joy we feel striving to reach our potential. That's a very different definition than most people have in this country right now. Most people think happiness is pleasure, right? Just it's pleasure. We either eat it, drink it, smoke it, watch it, read it, buy it, something like that. The Greek definition was being the best human being that you can be. Maximizing all of your gifts was pure bliss. Whatever that looks like contextually, whether it's at home, work, family, whatever, that was happiness. So when I talk happiness, I'm talking about positive emotional states, not just joy. Joy is one, but there are a lot of others, which we'll talk about here shortly. Do happier people produce better business results? Yes. From HBR, again, every outcome we can measure based on science, human beings flourish when they feel their best. Now, these are the most common emotions based on science that if we can elicit these more often at home and work and schools, we can drive the kind of culture and well-being. Because some of us get lit up on joy. You may be an extrovert. So you're the guy that goes, karaoke on Friday nights or goes to the Dodgers game and that lights your campfire. But some of us aren't. Some of us are introverts, right? We don't want to do all the extroverted stuff. But where this falls down at work is too often when we think happiness at work, it's always social stuff. It's always happy hours and ball games and all that stuff. Well, I don't want to do that stuff. I don't have time. My wife travels. Or I don't want to do karaoke. Does that mean I don't want to be happy at work? Of course not. If we can elicit campfires and opportunities to create a space where everyone gets to feel included, it can be intentional and authentic and organic. And I'm going to show you how to do it in the short time we have. I mean, happiness, again, has gone global. I love this study out of the University of Kentucky. I'm not going to get in the weeds, but we had nuns who joined the convent in the 1930s. And we found these boxes. I didn't find them, but the research found boxes of these diaries that the nuns joined the convent. Why is that so powerful? Because by going through these diaries of the nuns, they clearly delineated really quickly that there were some happy nuns and some not so happy nuns based on the decision they made to join the convent. Now, why does that matter? They all wear the same thing, they eat the same thing, they dress the same thing. From a research standpoint, a lot. So here, again, I'm just going to extrapolate some of the data that came out of this. Folks, truth be told, the happy nuns lived a lot longer than the unhappy nuns. So again, whatever decision you have to make here about joy and happiness, it absolutely affects your well-being and your health. Stress is the #1 killer in the United States. We had talked about it earlier. It elicits cortisol in the brain. It breaks down every organ in the body. Hey, did you ever see Barack Obama, pre-president, and have you seen him lately now? Have you seen how he's aged? Not judging, best healthcare in the world, but chronic stress wears you out. Now, that aside, what are we going to do? There's 2 ways we can do this, and I do this. Number 1, I give you some tools individually. We know happiness is a good thing, but most people don't give you stuff to do to work on your own mojo. We just say, be happy. Doesn't really help me. It's like saying, hey, be healthy and exercise. Thanks, I didn't realize that. All right? And then what do we do to help the collective to make happiness an expected work practice? So there's a couple things we can do on this. Number 1, 50% of your current level of happiness is in your genes. You inherited it from mommy or daddy. So if you're struggling right now, you better get on the phone and call mom or dad later, okay? 10% is circumstances, meaning things out of your control. Just the economy, all that stuff. 40% based on science are things that you can do to intentionally manage your mindset. So here are some things that you can do based on science. Celebrating small wins. We call them tiny victories. Celebrating wins every single day. Positive journaling. You find one positive experience at work every single day and you journal it for 2-3 minutes. I love the journaling because we did this with MS patients. And with MS patients began to journal about positive experiences, they were able to lower their pain medication. Because when we journal about positive experiences, the brain gets to relive them and started firing off oxytocin and dopamine. Gratitude, writing things you're grateful for. Meditating. Again, giving people at work some actual tools to intentionally manage their mojo, besides Costco pizza and Dodger games, all right? Now, that aside, what I'd like you to do really quickly, I'd like you to pick one of these. You're gonna commit right now today, over the next 21 days, you're gonna do one of these. I want you to put it in your calendar. I want you to hold yourself accountable. Which one of these can you do over the next 21 days to make happiness an expected work practice for you, a mindfulness practice? If you're up for it, which one would you do? Anyone here meditate? All right, so boom, the science is pretty clear. It's been around 1,000 years and finally science has caught up. I've got teams right now before they start meetings, they'll meditate for 3 minutes. I've got schools right now before a teacher engages the classroom, she has the kids meditate. Right, celebrating small wins. Do you think you could find one small win at work every day? Just one win? Is there always these tiny victories? I'll give you an example. How many here like football or heard of football? Okay, great. And I played college football, college basketball. Do you know why we used to celebrate first downs in football? Anybody?
Motivation?
Yeah, kind of, because if I don't celebrate a first down, how in the heck am I ever going to see myself scoring a touchdown? See, in sports we do it ritually. Is a first down a win? See, in sports we do it, but we don't do it at work. You have first downs every single day at work, every week. And if you don't celebrate or at least acknowledge or memorialize those wins, to the brain, it's like they don't exist. I'm not asking to be fake, but if you have a great week, a great day, you've got to let people know that winning happens here. If we don't talk about winning, it's like it doesn't exist. Now, that aside, some other things that I do individually. This is my screensaver on my phone. That's a reminder for me to breathe, to be present. Even me, and I do it for a living. Right? The average person spends 4 years of their life looking down at their phone. If you're already looking, could you at least use it as a tool to help you be more present or mindful? Number 2, I set reminders on my phone all day long. To be intentional about reminding myself just to be there. Not to be looking elsewhere, what I did or what I'm gonna do, but to be right there where I am. Number 3, when I eat, I just eat. When I drink, I just drink. How many folks do you see at work right now playing with their smartphone or multitasking while they're eating? We all do it. Not saying it, but again, these are things that you can do just to be more mindful, that are practical, to give the brain a hall pass. Now, smile. I know it seems like a layup, but how many folks do you see right now that struggle to smile? They walk in hallways every day, walk right by you, they don't even pick their head up. Smiling is contagious. We have mirror neurons. If I'm in a group or team and everyone is smiling, I begin to mirror what I see, right? Unless you're in Ralph's and you're in the produce section and you see that guy and he's like, hey, you don't want to be that person, right? There's always an awkwardness, you know what I mean? But just normal smiles. Now, that aside, let me give you a small takeaway before how do we actually take it back to work? Again, I think a little bit differently, maybe, maybe not. Too often at work, again, we think happiness at work has to be social. To me, social's great, but there's got to be more to happiness than just Costco pizza and happy hours. If it was that easy, everyone would be happy, but we're not. So what I do is the following. I show teams, and I want you to think about. Every organization has work routines. There are things that you do at work religiously, right? Meetings, conference calls, all that stuff. Everybody got me on that? Why do we have work routines? Because they're productivity tools. If we didn't have work routines, it'd be chaos at work. So what I show people how to do to make happiness a strategic and expected work practice is we actually embed positive practices into work itself. So I don't have to go outside of my job to be happy. I make the job itself more joyful in and of itself. Does that make sense to everybody? So how do we do it? Because here's some common work routines. Again, these may not be contextually relevant for you, but these are just things that I see at work that we do. We don't think about, we just do them. Now, what I would do if I was with you, I would look at all the different work routines in my organization, and I would look for ways to embed positive emotions into the work itself. So maybe I start my meetings before I dive in with a little gratitude. Or maybe we start talking about success stories. Or maybe we have a walking meeting. Or maybe the meetings are now 45 minutes and then an hour. We create 5 or 10 minutes of social time. Do you see what I'm doing? Folks, truth be told, most of the work routines that you do right now, you've inherited from our ancestors. They haven't been updated since like Henry Ford was running the show. We just keep doubling down on the same stuff in the same meeting room at the same time and expecting people to feel different. If you want people to feel different, you have to make it easier for them to opt in. So, here's an example of a principle that I use to help people. Anyone here know Tetris? Play Tetris? All right, so you know the game where tiles fall from the sky, right? Well, what's fascinating about that is at Harvard, you get to say it like that, by the way, at Harvard, any Harvard graduates here? Nice, I love that. At Harvard, they took business school students and put them in the psychology building for multiple days playing Tetris. Pretty awesome, right? That was one of your classes. It was an experiment. So what happened? Literally 40% of these students hours later and days later were coming up to the professor. Doc, something's going on with my brain. I'm freaking out here. I'm literally going in my roommate's closet and I'm lining everything up. I'm going in my trunk and I'm lining everything up. I'm in the grocery store and I'm lining everything up. Taking buildings. What happened to these kids' brains? It's called neuroplasticity, folks. If you do something for 6 to 8 hours over multiple days, do you think the brain begins to discern a pattern? Now, we didn't necessarily realize that at the time, that you literally can rewire the brain in a mere days. So why is the Tetris effect so powerful? If you want people to begin to see happiness at work, you have to teach them how to scan for it. So before our next meeting, we're having a meeting, he might say in the email invite, hey guys, before you show up for the meeting, I want you to tell me what's been your biggest success you've had in the last 30 days and come prepared to share it at work in the meeting. What does that do to everybody if you ask that question? Reflection. It makes you begin to scan, so the brain begins to recognize, hey, before you come to my meeting, I want you to tell me what's been your best memory working here in the organization. Do you see what these questions do? An easy takeaway for everyone in this room is to go back to work and begin to ask people questions that you work with. Send them a TED Talk, an HBR article, or something that they could do to begin to acknowledge and scan to recognize that good things happen. I do this with my daughter. I used to do it when I'm home. She's in 8th grade. Occasionally she'd go to middle school and I'm sitting at the aisle and I'd say, hey, her name's Finley. I say, Finn, today's gonna be an awesome day at middle school. She's like, Dad, tell me why. I go, I can't tell you why, but ruin the surprise. She goes off to middle school with her little wolf pack. She's running around, she's trying to find that one good thing that's gonna happen. She comes home at 2:30, I'm still on the island with the same nasty cup of coffee. She's like, Dad, oh my God. How did you know that Mr. Edgerly was gonna let us out of class 6 minutes early? Yes! She's freaking out like Rocky Balboa. Truth be told, did I know that Mr. Edgerly was going to let her out of class 6 minutes early? I don't even know Mr. Edgerly. Could walk in here right now. But what did I do to her brain? I primed her brain before she even left to go around her environment and scan and look for something positive. The easy way to start to get people to find stuff is to get them to scan for it and recognize it. And you can do it pretty quickly based on science. You just have to ask. Too often we ask about all the problems. We don't ask about the positives. So, that aside, all good things must end, and so must my time with you. Thank you very much.
Devin, that was amazing, man. You crushed it. Really engaging talk. Probably one of the more energetic ones we've had in recent times. I thought that was really fun, and we really appreciate some of the games and experiments that you put us through. Definitely noticed a lot of banter, a lot of engagement in our audience. And I think that's just really awesome. And this is also kind of tailing in with what Valerie was talking about last week, workplace happiness. That happiness in the workplace is so critical for productivity. And it's something that we really need to think about and really need to start practicing in our lives. as it does make a difference, unless you are an entrepreneur and you don't work for anyone else or interact with any other people. But in any case, I digress. We're going to move on to Q&A. John is going to walk around with the mic. If you have a question, raise your hand. We'll save storytelling and comments offline. I'm sure Devin's going to be hanging out with us for a little bit. So if you have a story that you'd like to share, please save that for offline. Thanks.
Thanks, Mike. You know, I didn't go to Harvard, but I played a lot of Tetris. Can I get like an honorary degree?
Absolutely.
Hi. Hey, how's it going? Thanks for doing this. This is awesome. So we do a lot of this at my company, including mindfulness meditation, stuff like that. I think the biggest challenge is how do you go from, and this is what you do for a living, but how do you go from just what I would call an average company doing your normal work routines into this? You almost have to, feels like you have to slowly transition. If I show up on Monday and be like, okay, we're gonna be happy now and do all this stuff, I mean, people are gonna roll their eyes, and it has to be like authentic, right? Or it has to be so subtle that they don't even notice it's happening.
So, agreed. If I haven't talked in the context of that at work, it's going to be a little suspicious, because most people's context is happiness is something outside of my job. Truth be told, that's the context. That'd make them wrong. So, I tie it to outcomes. Everything that I work on is tied to outcomes. So, collectively, if I went with you or whomever, if you said that we have some big, hairy, audacious goals this year, do you guys agree that if we can stay in a better emotional place more often, we're more likely to hit those goals? Most people would go intuitively, what? Yeah. Are we more resilient? Yeah. Are we more creative? Yeah. Are we more innovative? Yeah. So if that's indeed the case, what I want us to do is maybe think about some ways that we can help each other stay there more often. You have to contextualize it in a way that's authentic and organic. If you work with a sales team, they're going to be very extroverted. But when I'm in Silicon Valley with a bunch of engineers, they don't want to run around with leather pants on, high-fiving a Rick James. They want to build, solve big problems. But you have to nuance it, tie it to outcomes in a way, but you have to let them build it, right? So, for example, for me, last thing, when I was in corporate America, I didn't realize why every meeting had to be 60 minutes. There's no data to suggest that 60 minutes is the ultimate productivity. So I started nuancing and making my meetings 45 minutes. Why? I gave you 15 minutes to go get a cup of coffee, go to the restroom, call your spouse, do whatever. But I gave people 15 minutes back. You know, that was one of the biggest things that I did, because I recognized their humanity, that it wasn't about me all the time. There's little nuances that you can do at work that will get people in a better place more often. And it's authentic and real, and people will get it. So.
Hi, thank you so much for being here with us today. I have a question about the 10% of happiness that's defined by your circumstances.
Yeah.
So I've seen studies that say that happiness is only correlated with wealth up until like $70,000.
Yep.
But what about the people whose circumstances are defined very much by that scarcity? So, you know, if they don't have a job that pays enough, or they don't have health care, or they have to watch the news because politics is affecting their survival on a daily basis.
Yeah, so I had a great conversation earlier about that, again, because again, it's if I don't have enough income to meet the needs of rent, car payment, food, certainly it's a little bit challenging to be in a great place. That's why I kind of demystify happiness. I'm a first-generation college student. Lived in an apartment. My mom had me when she was 18. I'm also biracial. My dad's African American, my mom's white. They met in the segregated South. My grandfather was in the Ku Klux Klan. Why does that matter to you? Because I grew up that kid. We had one car, I lived in a household. But the reason that I'm here today is because in my household, we barely met. We had something called hope. We had something called resilience. Didn't have a lot. But what we did have, I began to appreciate what we did have as an opportunity to spring forward. It's certainly not easy, by no means, and I don't want to discount struggle and adversity, but there's some things that you can do, and some people who stay above the fray even when tough times happen, that emotionally, because human beings without hope are no longer human. So you're right, there's a nice balance between the two. I'm not suggesting you're going to be Pollyanna running around high-fiving and say, oh my God, this is awesome. But there's some things that you could do intentionally in those contextual situations that people do based on science, just to keep moving forward. I'm also dyslexic. Couldn't read till I was in the 6th grade. I'm not making this about me. So I was the poster child of dysfunction. But in that, I had small little people in my world who, when I didn't believe in myself, believed in me until I figured it out. And that's, again, I think a big proponent of why I'm here. Yeah.
Quick follow-up. Is building resilience different or the same as building happiness?
In my world, it's kind of one and the same. Happiness, to me, is the gamut of positive emotions. So a big part of resilience is eliciting more positive emotions, so experiences. So if I have more experiences with people, again, to get me to keep pushing and believing, then I can see it myself. I call it falling up. Falling up. How do some people fall up versus that? Not easy, but great question. I'd love to talk to you more about that, because that's a lot of the work I do with kids who are struggling emotionally right now, who come from circumstances. And you can begin to work on their belief system early on, which is, again, another nuance. We could talk about it later.
Okay.
Yes?
All right, so this is kind of a complex question, I guess, but with the whole thing, what you're saying with 50% of happiness being due to genetics, my interpretation of it personally was that maybe more of people's, like that genetic thing, maybe some of it comes from the beliefs that were inherited throughout people's families that may be mistaken as genetics. For example, someone may be like a 3-year-old and see their parents arguing, and like they get seeing this for a long period of time, they get this certain characteristic of themselves, and maybe it's mistaken as genetics, but it's actually passed down family beliefs. Do you think there's like any truth to that?
I think it's both. There's certainly a baseline based on research, a set point. There's a set point, but if experiences are massive. If I grew up in an environment where people elicit more positive emotion, I'm not talking about extroverted emotions. I have 4 girls, right? So again, in my world, girls are taught to be pretty, right? It's all about looks, and that's how you add value. Not in my household, right? I'm trying to demystify what that looks like in terms of equality and equity. And again, I want my girls to grow up in a world that they don't have to be defined by money and looks and aesthetics. So again, it's just positive experiences. If you create more illicit positive experiences more often, that forms belief systems. That's how belief systems get formed, right? So whatever that looks like, I would agree. I don't think it's one or the other, it's both.
Hey, Devin, thank you so much for thought-provoking insights and statistics. I have a question about the difference between happiness and fulfillment.
Yeah. Just to be clear, are you suggesting maybe there's a difference?
Well, in my mind, happiness is maybe fleeting, whereas fulfillment is like sustained. And maybe I'm wrong.
So that's why my definition of happiness is more akin to the Greek definition of happiness. It's not about pleasure, it's not about fun, it's about flourishing or well-being, which is a part of fulfillment. Every day is not awesome, right? But again, if I have purpose and connection and other things, then I certainly can find it. So I would agree. Again, we typically think that happiness just has to be joy, because that's how it's been framed, right? Some days are more joyful, other days aren't. So again, my definition of happiness is akin to yours, which is the joy we feel striving to reach our potential. How do we elicit more positive emotions that are real and authentic and appropriate contextually for the time we're going through? If my husband or my wife just got laid off, joy's probably not the right emotion. Hey, way to go, honey! Pretty awkward. But maybe hope, maybe serenity, maybe inspiration. How can you intentionally elicit sort of more authentic, positive emotions more often? Because did anyone here get the secret sauce to happiness when you were a kid? No. So think, what's more important than being happy? You could say healthy, but I don't know too many unhealthy people that are running around high-fiving everybody. The problem is we got 1,000 years in the room and no one ever actually gave you happiness practices. You can absolutely begin to rewire your brain by some of these practices. Not easy, but based on science, you can do it. To manage this, that's why it's a choice. I do it every day. And we can bring it to work, too, to give other people tools.
Hey, Devin, thanks so much for driving up here. Great talk. I'd love to take you for a Costco pizza and maybe do a Dodger game sometime. If
I'm a big fan of those, Ken.
I don't want to upset you, though.
Yeah.
So I'd like you to take it all the way down to earth for a second, and because I've heard you talk about this before. And a lot of people think that change has to come from the top. The CEO has to go through a transformation, the VPs have to go through a transformation, and then maybe the culture will change. Talk about change happening from the bottom up. How do you teach the executives how to change the culture?
Yeah, so invariably, whenever I do this or I'm working with an Intech team, invariably, wherever you are in the organization, you always look up. Well, as soon as the CEO changes, then I'll change. I have to reframe that conversation because everyone owns a piece of the culture. You either make a deposit or withdraw every single day in how you show up. Now, there's a macro culture, certainly, but depending on where you work and who you work with in the organization, there's all these micro subcultures. The problem is with other lateral leaders and managers, we don't actually give them tools on how to create a high-performing culture. And that's the work that we can do based on mindfulness, to give them some real practical tools to create the kind of culture that makes sense. I'll give you an example. I was at Lockheed Martin in Orlando, Florida not too long ago. I had a manager in the room stand up. You know Lockheed, huge defense manufacturer. Stands up in the middle of the room and goes just like this in front of his whole finance team. Ladies and gentlemen, we're gonna have no meeting Wednesdays. Everyone's like, why would I do that? Because we have too many freaking meetings around here. On Wednesdays, we're actually gonna get real work done. So no meetings on Wednesdays. Do you think that went over pretty well with everybody? You don't think having no meetings on Wednesdays would be a good thing? It was a good thing for them. I don't know about you, but most people don't want to go to meetings. They've got 25 plus meetings. My point of that story is he was nuancing to culture to serve the people that work with him so they could do more productive work. Most people don't think they have an opportunity to change it. I don't ask you to boil the ocean. I'm asking leaders to begin to boil a pot of water. And there's some things you can absolutely fundamentally do in your sub-teams to make the work a little bit more palatable for everybody so they feel better, perform better, and feel like they can contribute to something bigger than themselves. So you can certainly do it, but it's a mindset. And right now, I will tell you there's some certain things that you're doing right now at work that we've been doing for years and years, and they don't serve us. Why do we keep doing them? I call them social scripts, by the way. There's all these scripts that run around. That's what culture is, a bunch of series of social scripts. These are unwritten rules about what we do. And what I find with most provocative organizations, they get rid of some of these social scripts. Why do meetings have to be 60 minutes? Why do we have to have gadgets in meetings? Why do they always have to be in the same meeting room? Why do you always have to talk? Can't other people talk? You see what I'm saying here? You intuitively get it, but we don't do anything about it. And what you find, these are non-budgetary items that you can absolutely nuance the culture, and people will absolutely, wow, that was awesome. And all I did was nuance our work routine, which changes the culture. We got a lot more to that, but that gives you a little context. Yes?
Hey, hi. Thanks for the presentation. Quick question. If you were to select the top 3 or top 5 things that can bring happiness for a person, will you have money in that list?
Would I have money? Real talk, yeah, there's a fundamental level of certain baseline, yes. Yes, I would. But again, it's relatively speaking. I've worked in some high-tech firms, not gonna talk about them, where people are making a lot of money and still not enough. Because we have this thing called relativism, right? I'm looking around, 120 was really good when I was here, and then I look over, and the guy who went to Cal's now making 140. And I'm like, 120 all of a sudden feels inadequate. So we start to equate our worth with our W-2, and that's a very slippery slope. So I've worked in organizations that make a lot of money, and guys are still miserable. But yes, it could be in the comparison game. And I could go on, but I'm not going to discount that it certainly matters based on what she asked earlier about a certain, depending on where I live. But yeah.
So Devin?
Yeah.
Thank you. You played competitive sports.
Yes.
So how do you feel about the trend to everyone gets a trophy?
Not a big fan of it. That's my bias. Because I don't think right now you start to build the equity and the resilience that you need to fight through. Like my girl in 8th grade, I don't think she's ever lost a game. Meaning that she really can't discern between losses and wins because it just feels the same. So we've normalized. I think a big part of being successful, it's easy to be happy when everyone's calling your name, throwing rose petals at your feet, and saying you're friggin' awesome. What I like to build is how about when things don't go your way? When you're not the smartest in class, when you're not the strongest. That's when I need you to build some equity and some resilience And I think and part of that in sports right now, what I'm seeing, we're kind of discounting that piece. All right, you read the New York Times, you call it the helicopter. I mean, my kids play competitive soccer, literally at practice. For those of you who have kids, they play competitive soccer. It looks like a spectator sport. Every parent is up at the fence watching practice. Why? Because they're literally evaluating where little Sally is getting the touches or the ball, or why isn't she in that activity, or why isn't the coach talking to her? Think about that where we are as a species. I don't know. Not a big fan. I think there's a balance always, but it's certainly a problem in my eyes.